Imagine standing in a cage, not a prison, not a punishment, a cage in the middle of a park, in the center of a modern city, while thousands of people walk past, point at you, and pay money to watch you exist. This happened. Not in ancient times, not in some distant barbaric era. This happened in Paris, in Brussels, in New York, in London, and the people watching didn't think they were doing anything wrong. They thought they were learning. The year is 1906, the Bronx Zoo, New York City. A man named Ota Benga is on display. He is 23 years old. He is from the Congo. He has survived a massacre that killed his wife and children. And now, he is living in an enclosure, next to an orangutan, with a sign on the cage that reads, "The Missing Link." Thousands of visitors come to see him every day. The New York Times defends it. The zoo director says it's educational. And almost no one asks the obvious question: what exactly are we teaching people here? Ota Benga was not an exception. Between the 1870s and the 1950s, human zoos, also called ethnological exhibitions, were held across Europe and America. Belgium displayed 267 Congolese people in a fake African village at the 1958 World's Fair. Germany exhibited Samoan and Sudanese people as exotic specimens. France brought Amazonian tribes to Paris for public entertainment. In total, historians estimate that over 35,000 indigenous people were displayed in these exhibitions across the Western world, and they were visited by hundreds of millions of people. So how does this happen? How do educated, civilized people, people who went to church, read newspapers, believed in progress, watch a human being in a cage and feel nothing wrong? The answer is both simple and terrifying. They didn't see them as fully human. This wasn't an accident. It was a system. Scientific racism, the idea that human beings could be ranked on a biological hierarchy, was not a fringe theory in the 19th century. It was mainstream science. It was taught in universities. It was published in respected journals. It had a name: social Darwinism. And human zoos were its museum. The exhibitions didn't just entertain. They taught people what the hierarchy looked like. They made racism feel natural, inevitable, scientific. You weren't just watching a person in a cage. You were watching proof of an idea. Here is where it gets uncomfortable. Because it's easy to sit here in 2024 and feel horrified, to look at those crowds and think, I would never. But the psychology that made human zoos possible didn't disappear in 1958. It changed shape. We still have systems that dehumanize people at scale. We still have institutions that reduce human beings to categories, to data points, to economic units, to statistics. The difference is that today, the cage is invisible. Hannah Arendt called it the banality of evil, the idea that history's greatest atrocities weren't committed by monsters. They were committed by ordinary people, following ordinary systems, without ever stopping to ask, wait, is this wrong? The visitors to human zoos weren't all sadists. Most of them were just not asking. Ota Benga was eventually released from the Bronx Zoo after protests from black ministers in New York. He lived for 10 more years. He learned English. He went to school. He tried to build a life. But he never stopped trying to go home to the Congo. In 1916, he borrowed a revolver, and he used it. He was 32 years old. The last human zoo closed in 1958. That's not ancient history. That's within living memory. Which means somewhere right now, there are people alive who stood in those crowds, who looked, who pointed, who paid their ticket, and went home for dinner and didn't think twice. They weren't villains. They were just people who never asked the question. So here's yours. What systems are you part of right now that future generations will look back on with horror? And more importantly, are you asking? Subscribe for more uncomfortable history.